am so excited to have a really open and interesting conversation with three really amazing people that I love and adore, and am very inspired by personally. Let me bring them out. First, I want to bring out Esther Wojcicki, truly a figurehead and a legendary visionary in learning. Esther, distinguished visiting scholar at MediaX at Stanford, 2009 MacArthur Foundation Research Fellow, 2002 California Teacher of the Year by the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing, 2011 Charles O'Malley Award recipient from Columbia Scholastic Press, 2013 awarded honorary doctorate from Palo Alto University, and 2016 an honorary doctorate from Rhode Island School of Design.
Oh my God. Thank
Amazing.
you.
Welcome, Esther.
Thank you very
Please,
much.
take a seat. Hiram Chodosh, the president of Claremont McKenna College. He's been there for the last 5 years, I believe. Really doing amazing things at Claremont, undertaking some really hard challenges. In 2011, he was actually named a recipient of the Gandhi Peace Award. You're going to hear a lot about his expansive thinking and how he's really trying to tackle problems day to day as well. Yes, welcome, Brett. Hiram. And last, we have Brett Wigdortz. He's the CEO and founder currently of Teach First. I think he's looking for the next thing as well. So welcome, Brett. He started Teach First in 2002 and has worked consulting, journalism, and as a researcher, education primarily. Based originally in New Jersey, background in economics primarily. He's also co-founder and trustee of Teach for All. Serves for the board of future leaders on advisory boards, Education Endowment Fund, and SCIR. So a lot of really interesting experience, pretty diverse, mostly US-based, candidly, but a lot of experience internationally too, so I think we'll probably touch on that a bit. So I want to first just open it up and give each of you a chance to share with us. I think everyone can see your deep backgrounds and experience, but I think we'd love to understand what's your unique perspective. What do you uniquely, from your background and experience, what do you uniquely think about the future of learning as it is today? We'll start with Esther, please.
So the future of learning has to change in America and the world because it's based on a system that was established before the internet and before we learned from the web. So the future of learning has to include the web as an important partner. Most people in education, actually worldwide, they are still in the lecture model and the book model. So students go to classes, they listen to lectures, they read books, and then they take a test. And they forget that we all learn the most from that device in your pocket. And you all have it, and so do the students. And so we need to change the way we think of learning by including that in the way we're teaching. Great.
Hiram, your unique perspective.
Well, I have a mixture of deep worry and high hope. I worry that we're failing. If you look at the accomplishment of our K through 12 system and in basic objective terms how poorly our students are doing in science and math and other fields. If you look at the college graduation rate for four-year programs, only 60% of our national college-going students graduate within 6 years. And I also worry terribly about an uncertain future that I'm not sure we have fully grasped or understand. That's as you are all basically reflecting on the last few days, is changing at an exponential pace. And so I worry that because we cannot grasp that future, Yogi Berra perhaps said it best when he said future ain't what it used to be, that we're not aligning our educational investments with what we need our students to contribute to the world that will be theirs. Now, having said that, I'm extremely hopeful at the same time. Always looking for what we might call a positive deviance within an otherwise dysfunctional ecosystem. And many of you represent that positive deviance. We have to do a much better job at bringing that together to define the human capabilities, the values, the virtues that will sustain this generation and the society going forward. And I would just put out 3 that we've been experimenting with at Claremont McKenna College and that I've been talking to a lot of colleagues about. And they all focus on complex problem solving through collaborative leadership in increasingly diverse and challenging settings. Creativity, empathy, and courage. And these are 3 of many capabilities that I believe we have to take seriously, we have to manage to, we have to rhetorically and reflexively internalize, and we have to develop innovative ways of developing training programs that not only invest in these capabilities, but are capable of measuring them and the results that our students can achieve in each of those areas.
Great. Brett.
So I'm optimistic in many ways. The last few days I've been a bit jealous of all the other fields that I've been seeing around here and seeing all the exponential growth and all these exciting developments. And I think in some ways education is still waiting for those exciting developments that the first generation or 2 of ed tech hasn't really had the results that we would have hoped and the results that have been seen in lots of other fields. And I think that's something that's really interesting to look for in the next generation. And I think in the future, it is still going to be teacher-centric. And I think more that can be invested in teachers, in augmenting teachers, in improving the quality of teaching, in improving the scope of teaching. That's great investments. Any school I've been to anywhere in the world, you could see how good the school is going to be doing based on the quality of the teaching and the quality of the leadership. Does the leadership and the teacher really understand the ethos of the school? Do they understand what they're trying to achieve? Do they have a real theory of learning for the young people? And I think there's a real underinvestment in the actual teachers in almost any country outside of maybe Singapore, 1 or 2 countries in the world. And the more that can be pushed around that, the more teachers can be augmented, the more it can help learning. Some great developments, I've seen around the world is, primary literacy and numeracy have really improved over the last few decades. That's a huge success. In London, where I'm based, London's gone from one of the worst cities in the world for education to now one of the best cities in the world. There's a lot of proof points that kids in low-income communities can really succeed at the highest levels, which even 10, 20 years ago, people didn't really think was possible, and now we know it is possible. So I think the possibilities are out there for education. It's just more about how do we really get the right teachers in the right places, the right leadership, and the right focus to achieve it.
Yeah, that's great. So we have a really short amount of time. I do want to reserve a little bit of time for questions from the audience as well. So prepare your questions. And to help facilitate follow-up, I'd love to get a little bit deeper insight in how each of you think and sort of little about who you are. So I have a series of really rapid-fire questions that you're gonna. The answers are 1 word, 1 sentence, or 1 tweet. Okay, so that tweet level. No longer. Okay. So first question. And we'll just go down the line, okay? So first, what apart from your specific field are you most fanatical about?
The job market.
Job market, okay? Hiram?
Trail running uphill.
Trail running uphill, awesome. Brett?
My children.
Your children, okay, good. What movie do you love that you're pretty sure nobody else loves?
Yeah, you should all watch this movie. It's incredible. It's called Once in a Lifetime, and it's originally in French, but it's got subtitles. It is a great movie.
All right, Once in a Lifetime. Hiram?
I was going to pick My Life as a Dog, but I'll go for this audience with Rainmaker.
Rainmaker, good.
Well, probably other people like it, but I love It's a Wonderful Life. It makes me cry every Christmas.
That's a cop-out. Come on. Everybody loves that movie. What is the thing you're most embarrassed to tell us about?
The movie that I'm most, that I'm most embarrassed to tell people about. And it should probably have something to do with education, probably.
Oh, you're thinking too hard. We'll come back to that.
Yeah.
Okay, great. What in your life was your biggest failure or mistake that led to your greatest learning moment?
So my biggest failure was when I first started to teach, I followed the whole system. You get a class, they tell you what to teach, they give you a book, you have the students, and then you follow directions. So I did it for 2 years. And then actually it made me so sick, I got physically ill. And I had to go to the doctor. I had chronic stomach aches. Anyway, that was a big failure. And so I revolted, and now here I am today.
Total systemic response to conformity. Got it.
Yeah.
I think that sums up Esther really well, actually. Hiram.
For me, at the heart of my commitment to education is the experience of basically failing at almost everything that I do reasonably well now. And so going back to my childhood, I just sucked at everything I tried and somehow managed to overcome that and eventually learned how to learn. And it's the commitment to sharing that process. In some ways, you never want to learn from someone who's an autodidact because they don't know anything about struggling. And so I think great educators at some point deep down have struggled with learning so much that they want to share the joy of overcoming that with others.
Great. So everything, basically, is what you're saying.
Great.
Okay.
Well, my embarrassing movie probably was last week. I saw Captain Underpants with my children, and that was a lot of fun. I probably laughed too hard on that one.
Awesome. Captain Underpants, got it.
I think when I started Teach First, I was very task-focused and wasn't people-focused enough. And about a year or two in, I did a 360 review, and I got probably the worst feedback possible, where people, it was very obvious people didn't like spending time with me. One person called me a cancer on the face of the organization, I think. Another said, stay away from me. And I quickly realized, I think I'd been so task-focused, and I think probably one of my big lessons is the importance of being very people-focused in any organization or any leadership role.
Oh, great, great. If you could talk to anyone alive or dead, who would it be?
Well, I would talk to John Dewey.
John Dewey?
Yeah, so 100 years ago, he said that learning was doing. And I don't know what happened in that 100-year period, but people seem to have forgotten.
I think I'd want to talk to one of my great-grandparents about their journey from Eastern Europe through Ellis Island and what was going through their mind and what that whole experience was. I learned a lot of that from my grandmother, but she was only 8 when they came to New York, and I would have liked to have spoken to her parents.
Wow. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, I would have to say my dad, who unfortunately passed away too young, and was very supportive, and was someone who taught me very much about the goodness of people and how important change is, and was great working with kids throughout his whole life.
Wow, awesome. Last question. What's your best advice to parents?
My best advice is trust and believe in your children, because they are more capable than you think. And if you trust them and believe in them, they will rise to your expectations.
I don't know if you know Esther's daughters, but she has quite accomplished set of daughters there. So
Should I tell them?
please, congrats. Yeah.
So
Gush.
Anne,
away.
the youngest one, is the founder of 23andMe, personal genetics. Janet, the middle daughter, is professor of pediatrics at UCSF Medical Center, and she is specializing in AIDS patients and the obesity epidemic. And Susan, the first daughter, is the CEO of YouTube.
Amazing. Amazing. So you somehow did something okay along the way, so congratulations on that.
Thank you.
I was going to say the precise same thing, but I want to just elaborate on it a little bit, because I think we live in an age, and there are probably a lot of people in the audience that are going through this with kids, or kids in high school or college-going kids who are nervous about what I sometimes call the 1% train problem, that there's somehow this 1% train that's leaving the station, and they've internalized all these ideas about everything their kids have to do to be on that train. And a lot of those things run counter to the wise advice that Esther just gave, to try to manipulate situations, to bolster, to make sure that they are successful in every respect, perfect in every respect, completely successful across every board. And I think that cultural tendency, the forces that are at play there, require all of us to step back from that and do exactly what Esther advises.
I love that. I have 2 small kids. I somehow miraculously got my 3-year-old into Bing, which is Stanford's preschool program. It's run by the neuroscience school at Stanford. And in the orientation day, we met other parents and the kids, and one of the parents was adamant that we're getting into Bing so that my kid's going to get into Stanford. The kid is 2 years old and is already predestined to go to college at Stanford. I was like, wow, that's a frightening path forward, potentially.
Can I say one more word about this?
Yeah, please.
That I see pervading our culture, and not just in terms of parenting.
Yeah.
It's what I sometimes call linear instrumentalism. What I mean by that is we're teaching ourselves and our kids to work back from a result in a straight line. And if you look at, the studies on future of work and the mobility of this generation in terms of what it's likely to do, we know that, and also, how many people do we know that are really successful that ever worked in a straight line?
Yeah.
But also this whole notion that you're doing something today only because instrumentally it's going to look good to do something in the future is corrupt.
Right.
And we need to make sure that we're all engaged in what we're doing today to do that and to make the contributions that we're seeking to make. And we're going to be a little bit more open with serendipity to where that might lead us. I think that's another important aspect to trusting your kids.
Great. That was a long string of tweets, ... Good work, thank you. Brett, best
So as a
advice?
tweet, I'd just say, being comfortable with failure and letting kids fail much more. And I think, as you said, probably we're too scared to let our children fail.
Yeah, that's great. Awesome. Okay, a couple specific questions for each of you, and then we'll see where we go from there. Brett, first, you've worked in the ed tech space. You've seen a lot of interesting things. We've talked a little bit about just the empirical evidence and the realities of what's working and what's not working. Do you have any specific evidence for what is working today and what's not?
Yeah, so it's so interesting. So for the last 15 years, there's been so much investment in ed tech. This past year, there's been about $750 per pupil invested in ed tech in US and Europe. The equivalent number of the amount of money spent on teacher support and teacher training is about $70. So it's about 10 times as much money has been spent on the technology than on the teacher support, which is quite scary, I think. And actually, when you think about the different priorities, I don't know if people look at it in that way. I'm on the advisory board of this thing called the Educational Endowment Fund, which does randomized control trials of different educational interventions. And it's really fascinating. And I think one of the things education needs to do a better job of is really get much more data-driven, much more empirical. It's one of the reasons medicine has that empirical evidence base, which enables it to then start to grow in different directions. And I was just at a meeting where we went through 3 different interventions. And one intervention is this affordable maths tuition, where the pupils would have a tutor based in India who they would Skype with twice a week, basically, and have a 30-minute Skype conversation twice a week with a tutor in India. The second one was something called Abracadabra, where they'd have a low qualified teaching assistant in the school work with groups of 4 of them for 15 minutes twice a week, and they would use paper. There was no technology involved. And the third was this flipped learning idea where they would go home and they would be doing some interactive work, doing some YouTube videos and doing some interactive work online, and then they'd come back and give the findings with the teacher. And so, the question in a conference like this is which of those 3 had the biggest results? And, it's the most counterintuitive that you would think of, probably, in that the flipped learning, first of all, had actually a negative result, where the class that did the flipped learning got worse results than the class that didn't do the flipped learning, because it was taking up so much of the teacher's time, and the teacher wasn't able to actually do proper teaching in the school. The work with the tutor in India had a neutral result. So basically, if they had spent that time just studying in the classroom, it would have had the exact same results. And there's all sorts of reasons they thought that might be. And of course, the one that had a really positive result was the paper-based small groups with a teaching assistant that were doing some clear tasks. And I think what I've seen is so much of ed tech over the last 15 years, so many millions, billions of dollars have been wasted, really, because it hasn't had a real focus on empirical evidence. It hasn't had a real focus on what it's trying to achieve. And it's been much more about the bells and whistles around government officials, head teachers, whoever, wanting to show off that they're a modern school. I've probably been to about 500 schools now around the world. And what I always think is, when you meet a head teacher, which do they talk about first? Do they talk about their whiteboards and their iPads, or do they talk about the ethos and the vision for the school? And if they talk about the ethos and the vision for the school, I would guarantee it's probably going to be a pretty good school. If I go into a school and the first thing they show me is the box of iPads and here's the whiteboards and isn't this exciting, it's probably not going to be a very good school. And so somehow EdTech needs to change to turn that around.
Wow, great. Very interesting. Very counterintuitive. Esther, you're also a pretty prolific author and writer. One of the most recent books, Moonshots in Education, you talked about the need for some breakthrough initiatives for really re-envisioning this learning experience. What's an example of a next generation initiative that you think can actually move the needle in education?
So I think the next generation initiative has to be the teacher needs to see their role as a coach part of the time. So I'm not saying that they're a coach 100% of the time, but at least, well, I've backed up into a corner because it's hard to make change in education, to at least 20% of the time. So giving students an opportunity to do some of the things that you were talking about earlier, the small groups, working with the one person, a coach of some kind, that's great. But I've actually even moved beyond that. So I have the small groups, I have the tech, but the kids are mentoring each other. So it's peer-to-peer, and it's incredibly effective.
Yeah.
And so that's my vision of pretty much how education should move, because you need to incorporate the tech in your teaching. It shouldn't be like, now we're studying math, and then reading, and then social studies, and now computers. It should be incorporating tech into all of those things to support the teaching and to support the students. And it works really effectively, and I've been doing it now at Palo Alto High School for, well, after that initial failure that I had the first 2 years. It's been working really well, and now I have the largest media program in the United States where kids mentor each other, and it's a relationship thing, and it works extremely well. And I was just going to comment on your flipped learning thing. Flipped learning doesn't work because no one wants to watch a lecture online. They don't want to sit in class and watch a lecture either. But so the lecture-based model is not effective. And I mean, you can lecture for a short period of time, which is basically what I do, 15 minutes max. And then after that, the kids have to do something if you really want them to learn it and get excited about it.
Yeah, it's great.
So,
all right, Hiram, we're going to move beyond the softball game. I want to ask you a pretty tough question that I'm sure you're under fire on a lot. Universities today get a lot of criticism about how expensive they are and what's coming out of it. The lack of placement for jobs and just the amount of debt that students are faced with can be crippling for their future and just the opportunities. You run one of the most elite universities in the U.S., a very incredible liberal arts college. I'm curious how you deal with that, how you face it, how you discuss it.
Well, I mean, I'm in a much stronger situation than a lot of my peers, mainly because we have a very coherent program and a very loyal alumni base. But there's still challenges. When I started, I went to the Obama's College Opportunity Summit, and the idea was that we were all supposed to come with our commitment. So I was young and I was naive and I didn't know any better. So I came with a commitment that I was going to raise $100 million for financial aid and scholarships. And I looked around and I read the book of all the other college commitments, and I was just stunned at how minimalistic they were compared to mine. We raised it within 2 years. And we're at 135 now, and we just took a major jump, about a 20% jump in the students coming in who are on financial aid. So I'm in a good situation,
right.
But I'm very concerned about, having said that, about what's happening nationally. And I think that there are a number of things to say about it. One is, we're not focused enough on the value proposition. The narrative is all about cost, and partly we're not focused on the value proposition because my peers and I haven't been explicit and articulate about that. We're doing in higher ed a lot of the time this year what we did last year, and not raising big issues about how to map the human capabilities, the values, the virtues, the performance capabilities, the transdisciplinary problem solving, onto what the world needs from our students. So having educational debt is not a problem if you're going to come out and be able to do something valuable. It is for the lower paying, high value salaries. We need some creative financial systems for doing that, and there are a number of loan forgiveness programs that have been commercialized and nationalized that are available to schools to make available to students who want to go into lower paying, to teaching jobs and other things that can be quite valuable. So there's some financial innovation to do there.
Right.
But the key thing in my mind that we really have to focus on in attacking both this very bad graduation rate, the students who don't graduate from college are worse off than students who've never gone financially. What we have to do is we have to bring work and study closer together for a number of reasons. One is to create a virtuous cycle of learning and doing. You quoted Dewey, learning to do. But there's also doing to learn. And I think we get those things kind of mixed up. We talk about flipped classrooms. I'm not so big on knowledge first. I'm actually big on having students work from a blank page where they know nothing and trying to imagine themselves as the author or the creator or the expert, because we know from learning science that it primes the brain for them to give them a foil of their own text against the text that they're studying. So I'd like to see us integrate more doing into the learning and to create a virtuous cycle of learning and doing that again leads to the ultimate goal, which is to learn new things.
Right.
In preparation for this world where we see industries creatively destroyed and others created, where we can't predict really what the future of work and community life and politics will look like.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of work to do to not just raise the funding, but to do some financial innovation, to bring work and study together, to meet the needs of communities that don't have access to education, and to create new innovative corporate models that combine philanthropy and a value chain in those communities so that students can actually study and work and make an income and not either fail to graduate or graduate with crippling debt without the skill base that would give them a valuable job.
Yeah, I mean, maybe comments around the future of work and how it relates to learning. Esther, you're jumping out of your seat here, so.
Yeah, I am. So, everybody is targeting college entrance. You're a college president, right? So that's why they all want to, be in Bing, right? So they can get into Stanford, right? They think they're going to do that.
Right.
So the entrance to college is the key to changing the education system. And what could you do with your colleagues to help promote more of what you just talked about? Maybe all schools, maybe all high school students should have some kind of an internship. Maybe there should be a requirement, and in addition to the SAT and to all the other stuff, maybe there could be something that would help control what's going on in the K-12 system.
So it's creating a vertical, if you will, of these human capabilities that high schools and primary educators also recognize as valuable. There's an effort going on now within independent schools that you may or may not be aware of called the Mastery Transcript. Now, this may be another failed experiment in the end, but I applaud them for trying to redo how we're evaluating students. And I have a meeting in November with 7 other college presidents and the leaders of the Mastery Transcript to work on this problem. Because if they go off in one direction and we're not with them, it won't work. But that also has to be built, that vertical has to be built all the way down into the pre-K years, all the way up into other echelons of employment.
I agree.
HR programs and so forth. Otherwise, it will not work.
Right.
And so we have to start somewhere. And I can only start internally first to build these capabilities and to allow our students to articulate by attributes that are desired in the employment world, but also in their communities, and then to be able to describe how they evidence those attributes through their own academic and co-curricular and extracurricular experiences. And that's a start. But beyond that, we have to get outside my bubble. I'm only accepting 1 out of every 10 applicants. I've got 1,300 students. That's less than a molecule in the ocean.
Right.
So no matter what I do, if I'm wildly successful, it can actually exacerbate this problem because then I'll have 20 students wanting to get in for the one. Right. And unless I put my focus with all of you on this broader national problem, and we figure out together how to walk this new road of disrupting the gold standard in higher ed by breaking up its attributes and embedding those attributes in our communities, unless we're really serious about an aggressive collective effort of that, we will not succeed. We'll succeed wildly at the elite level, and we'll leave lots of generations behind.
Great. I want to give a chance for the audience. Are there any, can we get the house lights up? If that's possible? Are there any burning questions from the audience that we can get in the next minute or two? All right, Patrick, you're jumping out of your chair over there. You can, if you want you to shout out, and I can repeat as well.
How do you wire the brain for change?
How do you wire the brain for change? Great question, right? We're talking about exponential technologies and everything changing before us.
So can I just respond?
You're going to jump first. Okay, great. Esther, you're up.
So, you know, it's a cultural shift. That's the biggest problem. We've been doing it this way for a long time. And so one of the ways to change it is to have peer-to-peer some kind of training. So working with teachers on a one-to-one, so they talk about personalized learning for kids, personalized learning for teachers too. Having, for example, college students just graduated who could possibly come and work with teachers and help them with the tech. You know, the reason the tech doesn't work, most teachers don't know how to use the tech. It is crazy. They give them the device, and then it just sits there because the teacher thinks that they have to be the number one person in the class that knows how to do it. And of course, they're the last person in the class that knows how to use any kind of tech. Those kids know everything, and the teacher knows nothing. Yeah. And so, anyway.
Yeah, no, it's great. Brett,
I mean, one thing I'd say, you look at the best education systems in the world, whether it's Finland, Singapore, China, some other places, what they all have in common is really good teacher training and teacher support and teachers learning from each other. The two other things just around brain, I wouldn't want to move totally away from knowledge, because one of the things certainly we've seen in England, especially for younger kids and under 16s, is too many schools in England in the past have moved completely away from knowledge. Kids get to be teenagers, and then they have nothing to build from.
Well, that's not good either.
If you don't have that sort of base of knowledge, then there's only so far your brain can take you, I think. And I think the other thing that we've definitely seen in England is businesses really complain the lack of interpersonal communication skills, and that I think there was a recent study, 86% of businesses said they struggle to find people who have the interpersonal skills and the communication skills to enable them to succeed in the world of work. Tech can often bring people away from those skills rather than improve those skills, and more, I think teenagers who are spending their time much more in much more social media environments, often they lose that face-to-face communication skills. And it's a question, how can schools also improve that learning?
We're actually almost out of time. You have something short?
Can I give just a quick tip here? Yeah. I think sometimes we miss the things that we already know. And I want to share two quick techniques that I think are, that help develop. I don't know whether they rewire the brain, but they certainly rewire an ethos. I went to a poor public high school. I showed up at my university, and they put me in a remedial program, and they taught me this one skill. Take a book, read the title. Okay, you're the author. What's the book that you would write with that title? Okay, maybe you can look at the table of contents for some clues. Write that down for 30 minutes. Now read the book. I bet you'll get a completely different educational response to reading the book. Second example, we talked about assumptions yesterday. Yeah. I'm in a class, Wesleyan University, called Nature of Mathematical Thought. We took Euclid's 5 axioms, and we built our own geometric theorems from that. We then got rid of the 5th axiom, and we built a non-Euclidean theorem. We got rid of the 4th, and we built a whole other universe of theorems from that. That was the most powerful educational experience I ever had, because it taught me to isolate assumptions, but it also taught me that I could work from scratch and build insights, build knowledge, build theory in a way that I never thought I was capable of doing. And it's techniques like that we know, that we need to grasp and, in our language, scale, rather than looking externally, looking to systems, necessarily relying on policy and investment, when some of these problems are deeply cultural in terms of our value, the value we put on learning as a capability of surviving and sustaining our future. And so I want to make sure that we internalize that.
No, it's fantastic. Okay, we're going to get the hook any second. So, one sentence, one tweet. If you had a magic wand, you could change one thing that you think would make the biggest impact around learning, policy. What would it be? Brett?
I'd like to see more ed tech that augments teachers, helps teachers develop as professionals and differentiate children better, and really focus on the teachers. How do you make teachers more effective?
Teacher effectiveness, okay.
I'd like to see us create a platform here or elsewhere that would allow us to really collaborate outside our areas of expertise. And I'll leave you with this quote. I talked about hope in the beginning of my comments. There's a great Chinese writer during the Republican period between the two world wars by the name of Lu Xun. And he said, hope cannot be said to exist or not exist. It's like a road on the earth. At first, there are no roads, but when many people travel in a single direction, a road is made. And we need to get outside the fork and look elsewhere, and we need to start forging through that thick thicket.
Great, great. Esther?
So the teacher is the key, and changing the culture of teaching is going to change everything. We need to change the culture of teaching.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Please join me in thanking our panel, Brett, Hiram, and Esther. Thank you guys so much.